We're meeting today because my sweet mates here, Marcia and Brittany, and I and some other folks have been talking for some time about doing more education research. And I'll let Marcia speak for herself at some point, but her Teaching and Learning Center and Brittany, they've been doing quite a bit of work in the last year in terms of getting people, faculty to do education research. As I understand, I've been to some of the meetings, and ATSRI would be interested in partnering with TLC to do research and get it published, and so we might work as resource for each other in that regard. My overview here is just that. It's just a quick overview of things that I see as potential. It might spark some imagination, spark being a copyrighted word for you, by the way. And it might help us figure out where we could overlap. The requirements would be that we get four people that are hardcore, in other words, devoted to doing some research, and we can all work together and getting some grants. And there's quite a few grants out there for education research. But there's, I don't think there are as many good proposals. So I think we could do that together. So, and Deb Clay just emailed me this morning about a biostatistician from a conference that she was at. Deb, I'll let you speak about that too at the end of the thing here, that wants to help us as a mentor in education research. So off the top of my head, the goals would be to help us meet the future of osteopathic education, medical education, there's quite a bit of overlap as we all know, and other healthcare professions. We get different glimpses of what the future of healthcare education is and healthcare delivery is going to be. It's kind of a fuzzy future. There's robots involved and genetics and all kinds of things, and we don't really want to bog down our our curriculum because there are so many things that they're already required to learn. So we'll just keep that in mind too. Where's there? Well, artificial intelligence is sort of dominating the news these days. Economics. Value is distinct from economics. End-of-life care is value, where value is coming in. Chemotherapies might be effective, but they might not have the value to a patient. So we're asking more about the patient and what he or she is wanting to do about their health care and end-of-life. And hi, Deb. Then informed and shared medical decision-making. Those are words that have been bandied about for about 2 decades, and I've taken some training in that area. Ethics. We're going to have people make decisions based on, sometimes based on economics, and we have to be supportive of whatever their decisions are. Real-world data is another buzzword out in the pharmaceutical industry. What it means is, how are these medications performing as far as the patient is concerned? And again, to tie it back to education research, these are things that our future physicians are going to have to know something about in order to help with decisions with the patient. We're getting a lot of new information. We know that. Mike can tell us how many new journals we have. Deb and I have talked about this. Nature and Science have a bunch of spin-off journals now. Nobody can possibly read everything. Translational research, bench to bedside. Phase 4 trials, which mean, in terms of FDA, it means how is the medicine working in the community? Are people taking it? And are there some side effects that we don't know about that we should know about soon? Dr. Joy Lewis has talked quite a bit about medical systems as health systems as a new course in medical curricula. Where does everything fit together, in other words, and more. Personalized medicine. If you come in with a problem, it looks like an ulcer, you might get a different treatment than Brittany because your genes are different and the way to approach it is different. It's very, very technical, very promising, and probably at this point too expensive to really get too involved in. And then learning to learn. The physicians, students, and newly minted physicians that go out there are going to have to keep up with a really fast-changing environment. And we want them to be able to catch up with things. Deb and I are working on a traumatic brain injury project for first year, and we found that a lot of physicians don't recognize traumatic brain injury in patients. So one of the needs that we see already is for physicians or physician students to get some training in recognizing, diagnosing traumatic brain injury. Okay, so here's the new, I'm fascinated with this stuff, I have to say, but this is a telemedicine robot, and in California, and I think somewhat in Arizona actually was a leader in telemedicine because of some of the remote areas. And there'll be clinics there with nurse practitioners maybe already there or doctors, but they could be able to consult with major medical centers. They can look at wounds, they can make some decisions, and as we go along, we'll see that there are robots that could do surgeries as well. We don't know when that's coming down the pike, but there's a lot of research being done on that. So what does this mean in terms of medical education? People have to think differently maybe about how they're going to treat patients. And we hope they don't have to learn a whole lot more about the technical, how to run a robot, for example. The tools that I use in medical education research are somewhat technical, but they're also very good at for designing assessments. The generalizability theory looks at it within the institution of medical education what layer is introducing the most variability in the output. And if the output is, let's say, the tests for anatomy or gross anatomy or something, it might be there's different instructors that are teaching it differently. That might be good. On the other hand, it might be introducing some confusion. And so generalizability theory helps us identify areas of variability and error in our system. Item response theory, example of this I have on a journal I've imported here, but the thing here is that some questions on tests are harder than other questions on tests. So item response theory tells us which questions are the lowest level that almost everyone knows, and so we don't need to ask, versus the hardest questions that if they know that, they probably know a lot of other things, intermediate questions. So that gives us the opportunity of computer adaptive testing, or making our tests shorter. We don't want tests that just measure one level of capability. We want to kind of get the full spectrum of a person's performance, a student's performance. That's, I think, well, this whole person collaborations, we're a unique school that has a lot of different programs. Can a physician confidently refer to a PT, OT, dentist is pretty obvious and pretty confident, but when to do that and what results to expect and how soon should they check in and find out how the patient is progressing. And then Qualtrics, plug for Qualtrics there, Brittany. It might be a tool that we can use. Do you have a question or comment you can? Okay. Genetics is another area, but it may be overpromised and underdelivered at this point. So as far as Brittany and Marcia are concerned, as I understand it, we do collect a lot of data already. We test students on certain subjects. How can we use our data to get publications, to advance the science of medical education, improve the quality of our education? Which tests are best for competency? That's pretty much what we're doing with paper and pencil measures. How could the weaker curriculum be improved? We have a unique distributed education system here where they're 1 year here, then they're out the next 4 years at a community health center. How's that going? That's a unique model that could be publicized and researched. And which skills translate to the best field physicians? And Lisa McCoy was one of the first people here that I heard, let's see how well our education is doing by finding out the performances in the field, which makes a lot of sense. And we have Apple Watches, and we have smartphones, and these are things that are going to be loaded with a lot of apps to monitor our health. How should our physicians interact with those things? How well should they know them and trust them? And then the TLC, maybe we could support your infrastructure, add on to some of the research that you're doing, and apply for some grants together. So let's see. We know about these. The only thing I would add is augmented reality and virtual reality for anatomy and physiology might be sexy but not useful at this point. We don't know if the patients are going to learn any better from that than they would from a prosected cadaver and other ways to learn. This is Da Vinci, Johns Hopkins. I was at Johns Hopkins a couple weeks ago. I saw this thing, and it does remote surgery, and of course, it would work right in the same operating theater. Physician looks through the giant microscope-looking thing there on the left, and it can do some very fine cuts and very fine surgery. So a surgeon is not going to just learn how to wield a knife. They're going to have to be somewhat technically savvy. How soon should we start educating our people to do that? The tools, we need to, this again, brainstorming. We want to teach physicians to be dexterous, and I'm going to just focus on that for a second. Palpatory skills could tell a physician a lot. And for tumors and fractures and dislocations, besides being painful, sometimes they are occult. And it seems like, I mean, years ago I heard that dexterity is probably the number one predictor of a physician's outcome, success. So do we measure that? You can't measure that with paper and pencil. That's something that needs to be observed and tested in a different format. How to learn, and diagnosis, prognosis, and treatment. Treatment, my theory to test is treatment is pretty well understood by physicians. It's not, a lot of times it's cookbookish, but the diagnosis is where we could save more money if we could more quickly identify a disease, its state, and where to refer to. So instead, the way our system is in the US now, at least, that we tend to send out for tests, more tests, other tests. There's inefficiencies in that, but it's built in because oftentimes of legal threats of malpractice. Nanotech, and we talked about smart devices. Nanotech, a friend of mine in Malaysia was working on this, and they said they get these very tiny devices, the size of a red blood cell, basically, and they're supposed to go out and do something or other in the body. But instead, they glom together and cause blood clots. So we're not there yet. Are you working in that area? No. So it's one of those science fiction-y kind of things that we hope will help attack tumors and so on and so forth. The efficiencies, we need to, again, be better diagnosticians or produce them. Reducing the provider burnout, we don't really want to keep loading up our medical students with more things to learn. Maybe there's specialties or generalists that will spin off that they can work with. And pay for performance comes and goes. You know, right now it's kind of on the down and out. But how medicine has worked in the past as an industry is you get more money for providing more procedures and tests. And every once in a while somebody comes along and says, wait a minute, this is the only industry where you could be inefficient and still make a lot of money. So let's see if we get outcomes and better outcomes, and we'll reward that. So that's something for students. Now this is a meal delivering robot at Stanford. And when I didn't go to Stanford, but I hung out there, kind of in the library. I liked the library. And they had these stripes painted on the floors, not these stripes, but just long stripes. Turns out they bought these robots back in the late 80s, early 90s, and they would follow these lines down the hall, stop in, drop off mail, and drop off x-rays, and then pick up things and move on down. It was a gimmick, let's be honest. It was kind of, we got the money to do this, we're going to show you, it brings in publicity. These things cost about $60,000 each at the time, and I got the biggest kick out of this because in October 1992, one went to the edge of the stairs and then just fell down. So there, you know, $60,000 machine. Didn't know what to do when it got to the stairs. And education research is broadly includes a lot of things. At the board and class examinations, we're familiar with class examinations. State boards, national boards are also very tightly monitored and rigorously monitored for their validity, reliability, and information value. We don't do that with our classes in most cases, but we could. We could make a name for ourselves by being perhaps the only osteopathic or medical college that really pays close attention to our testing and how that relates to our outcomes. Team evaluation, I'll just say, I don't think we do that here, but University of Arizona on day one, the medical students are assigned to a group of 5. So they get graded as 5, as a group. And we all know how that works. One guy does all the work, and 3 guys coast, and 1 guy is home sleeping, kind of thing. So the question that they posed to me, because I was working with them at that time, was how do we evaluate a team where that kind of dynamic often goes on? And so there are answers to that. Maybe we don't need to get into that. But teams can be evaluated, and as part of their education. I do believe that teams, more people are better than fewer people in places like emergency rooms. Reflective practitioner. Deb and I were talking. There is a book called Reflective Practitioner. How many of you have heard of that? Okay, yeah, you did yesterday. Brittany, have you read it? Yeah. My mentor had me read it, years ago, and I was just blown away by this because it involves mentorship. It involves what a student picks up by working with a professional, subconsciously, unconsciously. And there's nothing like it so far. We can't make distributed education and all these high-tech things replace working with another under close supervision. So, and I think that human aspect of care is something that we should celebrate and not let go of. Grants, this is from University of Kansas, Academic Medical Educators, funding sources, Arthur Vining Davis, it's a familiar name from PBS, Alfred P. Sloan Foundation. And there are specialties like the bottom one, Association of Professors of Gynecology and Obstetrics. So you can get very specialized. Teleflex medical education grants. This I put in here because, let's see, they were interested in, I think it was telemedicine was what I was thinking, but could be for something else. And then costs and funding for published medical education research. Bottom line here, I just want to show you that there's stuff out there in PubMed. Bottom line here is each medical education study costs about $25,000 or less. It's not a big deal. And we could, because I think the measures are all in place pretty much, and we could fish for some of that funding. So that's it. Questions, comments? I'd sure love to hear from you two and Mike. Yeah. Brittany? Oh, hold on.
Hello.
There you go.
That 25,000 you mentioned, is that to keep it within the institution or to broaden out to other institutions? Do you anticipate a larger cost if we were to include other institutions other than ATSU?
I hope everyone heard that question. It might be, since we have distributed community health centers, it might be more than that.
One of the few limitations I've been reading in a lot of these articles has been it was limited to one institution. So I understand that the more you broaden and increase the amount of population you're looking at, the greater the outcome. Is that accurate?
I don't know that it's the outcome necessarily, but the more reliability that might be involved in the study if you broaden out. So it's not just becomes a case study, but it actually is, a research project that involves several different institutions. Then you've got several different sets of data to compare, and you're more likely to get a reliable response on whatever you're testing for.
Right. I can imagine in the analogy of a multi-center clinical trial, it introduces a lot of complexity, but you can get to more detail about which institution is better and why at executing a certain curriculum. So
there's a place for both case studies and for, across institution type research in the publications. So it's not one or the other. I'd like to make that, just clear.
Okay. Thank you, Marcia. Brittany.
Yeah, and I think, Dr. Menke, this is Debbie. I
Hi,
think
Deb.
it's kind of expected that on average, when you're doing multi-institutional grants for education research, that they're going to be higher because of the, having to have additional staff to manage some of the intake and things at various sites. Even like the ACOM and AOA grants, where they do their mini education research grants, usually they offer higher awards for programs that are multi-institutional because, as Marcia said, it addresses a lot of that variability and data validation. So,
Yeah, it makes sense. And that would be considerably higher grants. I just haven't checked yet. Have you, Debbie, about the value of some of those grants? Are they like an NIH multi-center trial that?
well, obviously it's going to depend on the complexity of the study. I think one of the reasons that at our most recent ATSRI annual meeting, for example, education research is being encouraged because there is so much opportunity that's right there ready for the evaluation and publication. It's just that people often don't think of it as a research pool. So it's one of those things that can be pretty readily done without a large budget, often without even having a budget. And so it's often a good way to get either a project or a line of research started, or for a faculty member to kind of get their foot in the door with research, grantsmanship and things like that.
Yeah, I think that the people that you sponsored to talk to us, they're interested in collaboration too, aren't they? Are they mentorship only?
Well, yes. It's not a matter of collaboration. What we were trying to do actually was to help faculty establish their writing practice, and to do that, how to take a project idea and research it. And it was for the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning, and I think that's what Debbie's talking about there. A lot, you don't realize that you can do comparative studies on different type techniques that you approach, you know, in the classroom, in the clinic, and then to evaluate which technique is better or more productive for the student than the other. And those are all publishable type, you know, articles that you can get, do research on and get out there.
Sure. Deb, are you going to say something? I'm sorry. Were you going to say something else, Marcia? Britt? Deb?
Joan was. Hi. So
Hi.
speaking from the dental education perspective, which is somewhat of a different model than the medical education model, because we have students actually in the clinic for the majority of the time of their training. And so our biggest opportunity for research and biggest need is to figure out how to be strategic and effective in training clinical dentists to come in and do didactic and clinical education. They have no background in it, but they have a lot of knowledge and a lot of heart.
Right.
And so this is kind of an issue nationwide on how to where, what, how to prepare these very competent clinicians to teach in an effective way, and what would be the best way to prepare them for that. They don't know what a learning objective is. They don't know how to tie teaching with competencies. They're just kind of sharing what they know.
Are they willing to learn?
Of course.
Okay, good.
And so, I mean, one thing that I've been doing is creating a recorded basic educational process from ground level up. But it's a national issue. Everybody has clinical faculty who are adjuncts or whatever, and what is an educational methodology that would best prepare these folks to teach at a high level in a short time?
Great research project. Brittany?
Hi, Joan. This is Brittany Williams from the Teaching and Learning Center.
Hi.
Hi. Would you be willing to share any resources that you create with us, just so we can disseminate them out as well?
I can.
Or would you
I'm
be
making them as I go?
Yeah, I was going to say we have
everything I do.
We have
but
quite a few resources that could also help you too if you're looking for more like technology help or, you know, even editing features. If you'd like to collaborate with us, we'd be happy to.
Okay, great. Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Just something to think about.
Jones.
I think one of the key thoughts that I have when we start talking about education research, and particularly at the meeting in Tucson recently, where you have a lot of faculty who have really rich data sources. They're just not really certain how to get started on it. And really what we should be kind of keeping in our minds is, as an institution that has multiple schools and various programs that are very much a different approach to training and immersing students in environments, it's really a responsibility of ours to be able to publish perhaps almost somewhat of a comparative effectiveness studies on the different academic approaches.
I agree. Quite an opportunity, really.
Exactly.
Yeah. Deb, were you going to say something?
I'm an absolute novice to this field, but I've been reading up on academic medicine because of the projects I do with Dr. Joy Lewis. And I see this abject lack of data or any quantitative methods for validation purposes. And since I was just like wondering if people would be willing to explore those avenues is we already have data, as you say. Yes.
Now, do you mean original data, like from their classrooms? Is that what you're referring to? Yes? The biggest thing that I'm running into in having those conversations is they don't know where to get started. Just like Deborah mentioned, they have it, but they don't know how to interpret it. They don't know how to assess what they have. And I think that's the question that you're posing to the group. How do we kind of get them going?
Right.
And there's one target group that I'd like to discuss that we're running right now, which is our faculty learning community. They're right now using Qualtrics, to put instructional materials and really any supportive materials in there, and they're right now gathering data. We have the anatomy department is doing a stellar job, and they're going to have a huge data set by the end of July. So, but that group will need help in, now that we have the data, we got them to use it. Now that we have the data, what does it mean? And that's an area that our faculty learning community has identified as a need. We need help and analyzing it. So maybe that's an opportunity to collaborate there.
Right. Good. Would one step be to do a listserv for our group, and so we can kind of share resources and find out what's I didn't know about the learning committee,